my opportunity to eat it because John Walters has come along with his diary piece, and this will give me, some time to eat it and digest it and really have a good time with my cheese croissant. That's my cheese croissant, thank you. I'd like to hand things over to John Walters with his Walters Week for this week. John, where have you been to?
Cheese croissant is excellent. Well, look, let's face it, this weather, there's only one place you can go, right? Mm-hmm. Bognor. That's where I went. I mean, I feel a sort of spiritual affinity with Bognor.
Bognor Regis?
Yes. The way hippies do with Glastonbury, you know what I mean? There's something that calls me back to Bognor. I've had 2 programmes so far and 1 trumpet in the last 10 years go to Bognor. That is true. Because if I get on off the train at Victoria, you know, you're reading the paper and you're saying, here we are, Victoria, leap off. And you're trying to get, as you're halfway down the tube, you think, I've left the box. Oh, God. And you go dashing back and the train's just pulling out. And you say, where's it going? And he always says, Bognor, mate. Every time. I've had to get 2 programmes, Peel programmes, taken off the train at Bognor. It's quite amazing, you know. But I happen to know why these objects are trying to get down to Bognor, because I first went there, 10, 12 years ago. And I thought I'd go again on Saturday, just get a cheap day return and go again and reaffirm my faith, because they have this incredible doughnut machine. And that's what they used to have at Bognor. This is true. It's one of these great long things. And it was a whole process. It was like a little Disney kind of, you know, like the lifestyle of old Mama Possum kind of thing. You know, you can see the doughnut born. And what it did, there's like fat, a great big mass of fat, and then all chains and things clanking on, and the thing in the middle went flip, metal thing went flip like that. Sort of. So what had happened, you'd say, doughnut, please. And he'd say, doughnut. And he'd sort of press a thing, and out of a little thing would come a ring of dough, just into the fat. And then it'd go into the fat, and it'd go sort of halfway along, it'd go flip, turn it over, and then it'd go the other, and then out into the sugar. And the other side, it really... And obviously the guy expected you to say, 5 doughnuts, please, and then he could go... like that, you know, get a bit of tray going. But I was so fascinated, I used to get one, then start to eat it, then I'd say, another doughnut, please. Another doughnut. Another doughnut, please. And then he'd go... flip. Into the sugar at the end. It's not there. Used to be under the pier. I set off. For a start, I was amazed. Bognor on a Saturday, I just got a cheap day, and it's full of people. I thought, who's going to be in Bognor? The people who live in Bognor will be in Bognor. They're all like ordinary people. I had no idea they existed before. People live there. They're walking about the streets, punks playing jukeboxes and things. That sort of thing. So I thought, where is the object, my holy grail? You know, the doughnut machine. I went right down to the pier looking for it, past the oldie Bognor rock and humbug shoppy. And I thought, humbug, what? And then in the distance, and I thought, what's that? My missus saw a sign, and I said, what? Looks like the Poxy Hotel. I thought, that's very decent. I stayed at a few of those. And I told them to let us know. So I was to the tourist board. It turns out to be called the Pixie Hotel. When I got closer, which it turned out, not at all Poxy. It's a very, very nice-looking hotel, but a very unusual name. But eventually, you know, I went all the way up. I got on those pennies machines, you know, where you're dropping. The missus loves those, where you roll a penny down the chute. There's all pennies piled up, and you think there's all these things going... You think it's going to push. If I can just get my penny in, it'll push them all off. Ha ha, be rich! And then you roll a machine down the penny goes down the machine, clink, clink, clink. Just misses every time. Eventually, I did get 6.5p out of it, so...
All right.
Cost me 70, of course, going down the chute. What could I do? I then found where the doughnut machine had been. And there's a flap there now which is sealed off for the season. I'm sure in the summer it'll open it up. And, of course, it turns out, fish and chips. Got a big sign over it, fish and chips. It's obviously closed. I mean, the most obtuse-minded person wouldn't obviously advertise doughnuts as fish and chips, would they? You know, I mean, it's not as if they say, no, it still sells doughnuts, it says fish and chips. You know, even artists or something like that wouldn't say, well, we're trying to confront the essential nature of the doughnut and that. And well, you know, that sort of thing. So it looks as though no more will the South Coast ring with the wind and the waves and that distinctive... flip into the sugar. But what it will ring out with this summer at some stage, or I should say this spring really, almost about now, is a distinctive sound of beedly baba doodly beedy, shoodly bee, shoodly bee, shoodly wasp, as Viv Stancher used to say. No, it's not me. I went along on last Tuesday. Let me move the bell. We're going to do the famous bell yet. Because not in Bognor, but in Brighton, for instance, Dave Bitelli's Onward International, a sort of band with a sort of salsa kind of edge, a little bit difficult to Latin, a little bit difficult to actually categorise. They'll be at the Gardner Centre on the 22nd of February. Ted Curzon, who used to play with Charlie Mingus, very good player, will be with Don Weller, again at Brighton. Upstairs at the Richmond, it says, on the 16th of March. I've got a whole list of gigs which I clearly can't read out, that go from all over the country, because there's this organisation that invited me along to launch their little campaign, and they're called, it's the Jazz Is National Tours, and it's some people called Jazz Services from the Jazz Centre Society, and they're just promoting bands going around the country. There's Paul Rogers, 7 revolutions per minute, Dave Bitelli, as I say, Onward International, who we're going to have on the Peel show shortly, Dudu Pukwana, Ted Curzon with Don Weller, and for more old-fashioned jazz lovers, Digby Fairweather is doing a sort of tribute to the old jazz trumpet player Nat Ganella, a sort of British pre-war Louis Armstrong figure. But I thought it was worth mentioning, and people like George Melly, we all turned out, and gave a little clap and had our photographs taken. Miles Kington, and he was pointing out to us that, Miles Kington, who writes for the Times and so on. What did you say? Well, you found the donut machine, nobody else did. Miles was pointing out, he said, look, the trouble is in jazz, we often only rate the guys who are dead. And he felt that people like Bix Beiderbecke, we all say, oh, what a wonderful guy, because he died so young. If he'd have lived, he'd have probably finished up playing in the band behind the Johnny Carson show. We wouldn't have rated him. So let's look at some of the young jazz players who are around today. You might think, oh, it sounds like a lot of boring twaddle to me. Well, OK, go and find out. I think you might get a few surprises, so have a look at some of our living jazz. Well, obviously, we usually have a break for music. At this point, I didn't bring a record to play in the middle, so it's sort of Taramasalada is Spanish for I love you, which brings us on to Next Door's Cat. I spent a great deal of the week looking out of the window. I hadn't seen this blighter since Christmas, a black and white cat, because I've got cats of my own, obviously, but Next Door's Cat's different. He's Italian. We always refer to him as El Gatto, which I'm sure isn't Italian, but, he seems to not answer to it. He doesn't answer to anything. I mean, the next doors are Italians, so we assume the cat to be Italian. They're friendly enough. We don't have a lot of dealings with them. He sends a Christmas card, we send them one. But, they look over the fence. He'll look over occasionally and sort of, hello, Johnny. How are you today? And I'll sort of, I'm so glad you looked over, Rocco. I was pruning the peach tree, and I seem to perceive that I've slipped off the ladder and seem to have sprained my ankle. Hello, Johnny. How are you today? No. So we don't have a lot of dealings with him. It's a bit like that, So the cat's a bit the same. But the cat's a real rat bag. And he keeps coming up to our cat flap and looking through with this sort of look like that.
I wish you could see that.
Yeah, but he looks through with a kind of, you're talking about my sister, kind of look at my cats, and they're frightened out of their wits. And my missus is a bit frightened, because if she goes out, shoo, he won't go. Just sits there. And he'll, at her, won't go. If I go, because I'm bigger, obviously, if she says, the cat's in the garden, the Italian cat's in the garden. And I rattle the pans around in the kitchen, clank, clank, so where is my trusty chainsaw? I shout, and then he'll then just sort of turn, and he'll just walk through the hole, because there's a hole in the fence. He'll just walk through the hole in the fence. I think he's gone, But then I go out into the garden, and he's looking at me through the cracks, and he's still doing that same face at me. It's really funny, but as I say, what can I say? I haven't seen him since Christmas. I'm beginning to wonder, frankly, if he's not passed it away. In an attempt to forget Next Door's Cat, I looked in at Maxime's, a sort of very trendy restaurant just off Piccadilly there on Thursday, because it was one of those things that used to happen a lot, as you remember, the 60s, the 70s, a record company bash, when there's champagne and they're going mad there and they're having a little party. And I was invited along because it was to welcome Don Ellis back to England, who's taking over MCA over here, American. Basically, but he loves England and so on. He's a very big man in the record business. He's worked for everybody. I'm particularly sort of attracted to him, as I know him, because he married one of our old secretaries from the Peel programme, Brenda, who used to look after Peel for years. And she went to the States and worked for Columbia then, and he's married to her now. It's amazing. So she got into show business. Did you know that Jeff Griffin's Trish used to be a Diddy man?
What?
That's true. I mean, you think it's impossible.
That's Andy Peebles' girl.
Andy Peebles' secretary. That's right. And it just shows you think it's impossible working in Radio 1 to get into the entertainment business, but It can be done. Mind you, the chances of you or I either marrying Don Ellis or becoming Diddy Man is very limited, but we can but try. It was a crowded event. Everybody was there. Tony Hadley from Spandau. Was it a lot of stars, you know? All the jocks, everybody. Peter York, who invented the Sloane Rangers and so on. He was going around, like, taking notes, looking at the style, looking like the Italian cat through the hole in the wall. There he was. Marilyn was there.
Oh, yeah.
And I said hello, because got Marilyn on Round Tables, which obviously I produce. I've got that on this Friday with Tony Butler from Big Country and Peely. So I'm looking forward to that, because I had
Great
Marilyn.
booking, that.
Yeah, I had Marilyn last time when he wasn't known, you know, the record.
Yeah.
Crowds of girls outside. He said, oh, there won't be this time. He said, no, everybody hates me now in a ratty manner. But I don't think so. I think he's going to be surprised. But as I say, it was so crowded. We were all crammed in. The waiters, all the little Italian waiters, pulling Italian cat faces, like that. They're all going around, holding up great big trays of scampi and sausage, but they have to hold them over their heads. Excuse me, going through, and I couldn't see them. So it was only the punks, like the old punk bands who could pogo, who could get the food. They're all passing out their heads. So they're all leaping up with a sort of, I am an antichrist. Oh, down a cup. You know, all that sort of thing. I am an anarchist. Sausages. Down it all goes. And so I'm told about 9 o'clock, great many fat punks were waddling out there. Amazing scenes, amazing scenes. Speaking of next door's cat, Robert Wyatt's dogs are gone. You'll be glad to know. They were taken. Ooh, we had that small ads column, for 2 weeks? Get rid of Robert Wyatt's dogs. Robert called, because he was really worried he was going to have to start recording, you know, there will be Kennel-Building. Because, I mean, he's got so many dogs, but they've gone. And also to close out other small ads that we had last week with my gig.
Oh, no.
Which just happened to be in the King's Cross area. Free, anyway, at New Merlin's Cave. Marjorie Street. It went all right. Peel came down. There's about 30 people. They had a few drinks and a laugh. It was all right. BBC people played Dixieland. But the Higsons also turned up, the group, the Higsons.
Sure,
and they
yes.
said, look, we've come to see you. Can you get us on radio? And I said, look, on the Peel Show, we're unbendable. We just aren't like that. I said, but Kid will do anything. I'll tell him.
That's for sure.
So, when are you having them on, by the way?
I just bit my tongue.
Actually,
retribution, karma.
I asked Mike, and he says he's got them on Thursday. Before anybody writes in, they were already booked. Forget it. Good Lord, people are a hopeless bunch of jerks at home. Anyway, there we are. So, I mean, but the thing is, in Time Out, they've advertised, and me with the bell out, in Time Out, they've advertised our gig in there with the What's On in Jazz. Why not? It's on, it's free, you know. And it
I bet you're going to read it out.
I'm just going to say, Ian Christie, it says there, John Walters, Richard Wilcox, he says, and other BBC producers. Then it says, get your own back night for all disgruntled jazzers. Everybody who's wanted a jazz gig is now going to turn up. We'll have a huge audience, all saying, why did you book me in 1978? And we're saying, here's a good one from way back. Get off! But I'll say, play faster. Keep ahead with of the audience, you know, before they catch up with us. Well, I don't claim to be the voice of my generation, so... The voice of his generation. Who had lunch with Billy Bragg today?
Oh, you didn't, did you?
Art. He had beef, the roast beef. No, he had the lamb. They didn't have enough beef. He had the lamb, actually, if anybody wants to know. I mean, who cares? I paid. Same thing. Art! Again. I went along Valdemar Janacek, who's, that's easy for you to say, who is the young guy who's the art critic of the Guardian. He used to do some bits on Walters Weekly for me, and he had his birthday party Saturday, and we went over there. But all I was really interested in, like, I'm going to go to parties for the bread. You know, because I've got this bird table, which is just above the Italian Cat, you know, I mean, it's obviously out of reach. And I thought, there's always bread left at parties. And at the end, I said to him, he's dancing away, I can't get no satisfaction, the way art critics will. And I'm saying, any chance of taking... He says, yeah, take the bread, man, well, babba-doobie. But, of course, there was a stack of bread, and all these artists sitting around the bread guarding it, because no artists are a bit like, no, give me bread, and my pens. And so I got this Rose Garrod, who's a well-known performance artist and painter and so on, and Susan Hiller, who's very interesting woman artist, and does a lot of instinctive things like automatic writing and all sorts of things.
Automatic writing?
We'll do that next time she has an exhibition. I met a woman, she's going, so they're sat there, and I have to come up with a plastic bag on the bread, and they're helping me fill it with bread. But then I said to Valdemar, as I left, look, you won't throw the bread away. I knew it. Called him today. Threw it away. Forgot about it. Threw it all away. I could have gone on my bird table. But so many people there who said, look, you know, mention some other things, not just London things. And Rose Garrod, who helped me with the bread, She's got a very well-reviewed, I can't talk about it not having seen it, but in Birmingham, a very well-reviewed show at the Icon Gallery. And also Bill Fever of The Observer, the critic from The Observer, he has picked the artist for the big Liverpool exhibition that's on at the moment at the Walker Gallery. So any of you people who are out of work in Liverpool, which is everybody, I gather, or the boys from the Black Stuff, if you've actually a bit of art, go on to the Walker Gallery. The exhibition is called As of Now. Don't that put you off? But there's people from the New Sculpture School, the rubbish sculpture and so on, Bill Woodrow, Kate Blacker, Lucy and Freud, all sorts of people. I said I'd mention that because I don't mention too many things outside of London because I don't see them, you know. Just to finish off, I did go along to the Tate this morning just because there's the last couple of weeks of the Richard Hamilton exhibition there. Now, Richard Hamilton used to be a lecturer in design when I was at college when I started in the late 50s, you know. And, of course, we were all, you know, like the image of teachers that you have. You just left school, you got to college, and you thought, oh, he's a teacher. In those days, teachers were somebody, not like today, when, you know, all the kids call the teachers Dave. You know, it was like, even the women, they called Dave. You know, it doesn't matter whether they're Dave or not, doesn't make any difference. But in those days, you thought, a teacher. And that time, let me see, it must have been winter's 57, in Rivali, the paper Rivali, they... You know, like Page 3 girls, they had a whole paper girl. You actually could get the whole paper, cut it out, and pin it down the wall, and you got a life-size picture of Brigitte Bardot. And we walked by the door of the studio, and there's this Richard Hamilton guy, and he's got it, he's pinning it all up and stepping back. He's there, he's a teacher, he's got a Rivali and Brigitte Bardot. We didn't realise, of course, he was the father of pop art, you know, and influenced Britain and America and so on. It was all happening before our eyes. He's doing all these pop images and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, he's at the Tate. Another interesting exhibition that just opened at the Tate. If you want to go along, Hans Harker, I'll mention that next week. Haven't got time to do it this week. But as I say, there he was, all interesting things there in the Tate. Style, fashion, that's very much what he was into, you know. He's got some little prints in there, photographs or whatever they are, soft pink landscape that look like impressionist landscape. And then you can see this, some Andrex toilet paper right at the front there. I mean, it's all in there. It looks very nice, but, you know, he's into, like, advertising images. What do we read in these?
Like Andy Warhol did.
Well, yes, in a sense. You see, he was, you know, into all that sort of thing almost before anybody was. He influenced a lot of those guys, which was fairly amazing. But there is his work. Some of the interesting stuff you might have seen are his variations on prints of that photograph of Mick Jagger and the art gallery owner, Robert Fraser, after the drugs thing, when they were bust for the drugs thing, you know, when that was the swinging 60s, everybody was into drugs or that sort of thing, I suppose. I mean, that was before they all settled down to family life, you know, like the McCartneys and so on. But anyway, Robert Fraser there, as I say, he had the first big sort of pop art gallery, and I think John met Yoko at his gallery. I think she had an exhibition there. I may be wrong, but it was that sort of crowd, you know. And there they are, all different sort of shots of them. So I was interested to see those, you know, the way he'd had the treatment of that photograph and done it in different ways and so on. And then, on the way back, I popped in to the Robert Fraser Gallery. He's opened another gallery in Cork Street there. What's he got on? Pop art. What else? What else is he going to have on? I look in there. There's just have a quick look in. There's Richard Hamilton, same old crowd, you know, Peter Blake and Jan Howarth, who I thought Horwath was her name, I've forgotten, but she made a lot of the stuff for Sergeant Pepper for the cover and so on, the two of them, you know. There they are, and I suddenly thought, blimey, there they are, there's Robert Fraser Gallery and all these people in there. They ought to get the Arts Council seal the gallery and make it into a work of art, just buy it up. You know what I mean? People are going to look through the windows. What is it? Is the gallery coming by pictures? No, it's a little memento of the 60s. You know, and Robert Fraser could come out and sign autographs for people. And I thought, really, you know, how incestuous can it all get? Well, lots more, because Peter Blake taught Ian Dury when he was an art student himself. And, of course, for Peter Blake's Tate Gallery show last summer, this was the big pop art show, well, Ian Dury writes a song for it, so... See you next week, my little pumpernickels, and all I can say is here's a little bit of pop art.
Oh, Peter the Painter. And so we go with John Walters for this Tuesday in Walters Week. John will be back on Thursday for his weekly look at the pop press, and we can look forward to that about 8 o'clock. I'll be back with OMD in the third of our three of the best after the news.